The DNA test results fell from Marcus's backpack as I was helping him carry gifts into our golden anniversary party, showing 99.9% probability of paternal match. Walter Brennan, while 200 guests celebrated my 50-year marriage to the man who'd been secretly fathering children with my own sister. My chest constricted like someone had wrapped steel cables around my ribs. The same hands that had guided thousands of children through elementary school began trembling so violently I nearly dropped the laboratory report that was destroying my entire understanding of family. Around me, the community center buzzed with celebration. Former teaching colleagues, neighbors, extended family, all gathered to honor a marriage that had apparently been a lie for 18 years. "Marcus, what is this?" I whispered, holding up the paper that showed my husband as the biological father of the boy I'd helped raise since birth. My 17-year-old nephew froze, his face going pale as he stared at the evidence I wasn't supposed to see. "Aunt Audrey, I can explain." "Explain what? That Uncle Walter is actually your father?" The words felt like broken glass in my throat. "My name is Audrey Brennan. I'm 67 years old, and this is the story of how I discovered my husband Walter and my sister Thelma had been systematically deceiving me for 18 years while I funded their lies. They thought my childlessness made me desperate, that my love for family made me blind, that my generosity made me an easy target. But what they didn't know was that the same instincts that protected children in my classroom for 35 years were about to expose their coordinated betrayal and help me reclaim my independence in ways they never saw coming. If this situation resonates with your soul, hit subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. "Marcus, honey, your father is Raymond Morrison. We've talked about this." But even as I said it, my mind was racing through 17 years of memories that suddenly made horrifying sense. Marcus looked toward the party entrance where Walter and my sister Thelma were greeting guests together, standing closer than siblings-in-law should stand. "Aunt Audrey, everyone knows, everyone except you. Everyone knows." The words hit like a physical blow. I looked around the community center I'd rented and decorated, at the guests I'd invited to celebrate my golden anniversary, and realized I was the only person who didn't know my marriage was built on systematic deception. But it gets worse. "How long have you known?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Since I was 12, Marcus whispered. "Dad, I mean Uncle Walter. He told me when I started asking questions about why I looked like him, instead of the man I thought was my father. 5 years. This child had been lying to my face for 5 years, accepting my love, my college fund contributions, my birthday gifts, while knowing he was actually my husband's secret son with my own sister. The money I've been giving you for college. I know, Aunt Audrey. I know you've spent your teacher's pension on me. I know about the $127,000. His voice cracked with what might have been guilt, or might have been rehearsed emotion. "But they said if I told you, it would destroy the family. $127,000. That's my entire inheritance from Grandma Rose, spent on private school tuition, summer camps, and college preparation for a child who was actually the product of my husband's affair with my sister. That's 17 years of birthday gifts, Christmas presents, and helping family while they laughed about my cluelessness behind my back. Marcus, we need you for the family photos," Thelma called from across the room, her voice carrying that false sweetness I'd mistaken for sisterly affection for decades. I watched my sister approach the woman I'd supported through her single motherhood, the woman I'd helped with rent payments and childcare, the woman who'd been sleeping with my husband since before her son was born. She looked radiant in the dress I'd helped her pick out for my anniversary party, glowing with the confidence of someone who'd been living a double life successfully for 18 years. "Audrey, you look pale," Thelma said, reaching for my arm with the same concerned touch she'd used when comforting me through years of infertility treatments. "Are you feeling all right?" The hypocrisy was breathtaking. This woman had watched me cry about never having children while she was raising my husband's secret child. She'd accepted my financial help for her son while knowing he was actually my stepson. She'd comforted me through the loneliness of childlessness while building a secret family with my own husband. "I'm feeling very clear, actually," I said, clutching the DNA results. Clearer than I've felt in years. Walter appeared beside us, his arms sliding around my waist with the same possessive gesture he'd used for 50 years of marriage. There's my beautiful wife. Ready for our big moment? Our big moment. The celebration of a marriage that had been a systematic lie since before Marcus was born. I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and saw Marcus's eyes, Marcus's nose, Marcus's smile. How had I missed it? How had I spent 17 years loving a child who looked exactly like my husband and never questioned the resemblance? Walter, I said, my voice taking on the authority I'd used with lying students for 3 decades. We need to talk. The next morning, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by 17 years of financial records, family photos, and memories that were rewriting themselves with devastating clarity. The same methodical approach I'd used to track student progress was now revealing the systematic deception that had defined my adult life. Every family gathering, every holiday celebration, every coincidental moment when Walter and Thelma ended up together while I was busy hosting, cooking, or organizing. They'd been conducting their affair in plain sight, using my own generosity as cover for their betrayal. I pulled out the photo album from Marcus's 10th birthday party, the one I'd spent weeks planning and paid for entirely. There was Walter, his arm around Thelma, as they watched their son blow out candles, while I stood off to the side serving cake to guests. In 17 years of family photos, I was always the one behind the camera, the one serving food, the one making sure everyone else was happy while Walter and Thelma posed as the real family. But it gets worse. I found my checkbook records from 2019, the year I'd given Thelma $8,000 for emergency car repairs while she was supposedly struggling as a single mother. The same month, according to my credit card statements, Walter had taken a mysterious business trip that I now realized was a family vacation with his secret wife and son. My phone rang, interrupting my investigation. Audrey, it's your sister. We need to talk about last night. Sister. The word felt like poison in my mouth. Yes, Thelma, I think we do. Marcus told me about the DNA test. Honey, you have to understand, we never meant for you to find out this way. Never meant for me to find out, not that they were sorry for the deception, not that they regretted the betrayal, but that they were sorry I'd discovered their 18-year conspiracy. How long were you planning to keep lying to me? It's not lying, Audrey. It's protecting you. You've been so happy believing Marcus was Raymond's son, believing you had this wonderful family relationship. We didn't want to hurt you. Protecting me by stealing my money, my husband, and my sense of reality for nearly 2 decades. By allowing me to pour my maternal love into a child who was actually my stepson while they built their secret family behind my back. Thelma, I've spent $127,000 on Marcus, money I saved from my teaching salary, money I inherited from Grandma Rose, money I gave you because I thought you were struggling. Silence. Then, you wanted to help, Audrey. You insisted on helping. We never asked you to. You never asked me to pay for your son's private school. You never asked me to contribute to his college fund. You never asked me for rent money when you were supposedly between jobs. That's different. You were being generous. You wanted to be part of his life. Part of his life. I was already part of his life. I was his stepmother, though no one had bothered to tell me. I'd been funding my own stepson's upbringing while being excluded from any real decision-making about his future. After I hung up, I called my former colleague Janet, who'd been at the anniversary party. Janet, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Last night, did anything seem off about my family dynamics? Oh, honey. Janet's voice was heavy with sympathy. How long have you known? My stomach dropped. Known what? About Walter and Thelma. About Marcus. Audrey, we've all been wondering when you'd figure it out. The resemblance is so obvious, and the way they act together at family events. We've all been wondering. My former colleagues, my friends, my community, they'd all been watching me live a lie, while feeling sorry for my obliviousness. I'd been the subject of whispered conversations and pitying looks for years. How long has everyone known? Honey, Marcus looks exactly like Walter did at that age, and Thelma's never had a job that could support that lifestyle she's been living. We just assumed, we thought you knew, and were choosing to handle it privately. Everyone assumed I knew. Everyone thought I was complicit in my own humiliation, that I was choosing to fund my husband's affair and raise his secret child out of some twisted family loyalty. But it gets worse. I drove to Marcus's school that afternoon, using my former educator credentials to access his records. What I found made my hands shake with rage. His emergency contact forms listed Walter as Uncle Guardian, with a phone number I didn't recognize, a secret cell phone I'd never known about. His medical forms showed Thelma and Walter as primary decision-makers for a child I'd been financially supporting for 17 years. They'd been making parental decisions together while I paid the bills. The school counselor, Mrs. Patterson, recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Brennan, how lovely to see you. You must be so proud of Marcus. He's written some beautiful essays about his family situation." His family situation? Oh yes, his college application essay about growing up with his real father and the woman who helped raise him. It's quite touching, actually, how he describes managing the complex family dynamics. Managing the complex family dynamics. Marcus had been writing college essays about his complex family situation, while I remained completely unaware that I was part of the complexity. He'd been describing his life to admissions officers, while I thought I was simply a generous aunt, helping with education costs. "Mrs. Patterson, could I see that essay?" "Well, it's confidential. But since you're listed as his financial guardian, not parent, not family member with decision-making authority, but the person responsible for paying bills while others made the real choices about his future." As I drove home with a copy of Marcus's essay describing his real family and how they'd been managing the situation with his fake aunt, I realized the full scope of their betrayal. This wasn't just an affair, or even just financial fraud. This was systematic identity theft. They'd stolen my role as wife, as family member, as decision-maker in my own life, while keeping me around as a funding source for their real family. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated exactly how good teachers are at recognizing patterns, documenting evidence, and protecting the children in their care, even when that child turns out to be their own stepson. That evening, I sat in my home office reading Marcus's college essay with the same analytical eye I'd once used to evaluate student work. But this time, the subject was my own life, and the revelations were devastating. Growing up in a non-traditional family structure has taught me resilience and adaptability, Marcus had written. While my biological father and mother couldn't be together publicly due to his existing marriage, they created a loving environment where I always knew I was wanted. My father's wife, though not my biological mother, has been incredibly generous in supporting my education and development, even though she doesn't know our true relationship. My father's wife, not Aunt Audrey, not even my stepmother, but my father's wife, a woman whose generosity was useful, but whose feelings were irrelevant. I was described like a benevolent stranger who happened to write checks, not as someone who'd loved this child for 17 years. But it gets worse. The most challenging aspect has been maintaining the family's secret while accepting financial support from someone who believes she's helping her nephew rather than her stepson. This has taught me about the complexity of adult relationships and the sometimes necessary nature of protective deception. Protective deception. Marcus had learned to frame systematic fraud as a kindness, to see my love and financial sacrifice as something he was entitled to through lies. At 17, he was already fluent in the language of manipulation that had defined my marriage for decades. I pulled out my laptop and began what I'd done countless times as an educator, building a comprehensive timeline. But instead of tracking student progress, I was documenting 18 years of systematic betrayal. March 2006, Thelma announces pregnancy, claims father is Raymond Morrison, who isn't ready for commitment. April 2006, I offer to help with baby expenses, start monthly support payments. December 2006, Marcus born, I'm present at hospital, hold him first after Thelma. 2007-2010, I pay for daycare, medical expenses, clothing while Thelma struggles financially. 2011, Marcus starts calling me Aunt Audrey instead of just Audrey. Coached behavior to maintain deception. 2015, I pay for private school tuition after Thelma claims she can't afford good education. 2019, Marcus begins resembling Walter so strongly that strangers comment, but I dismiss it as family resemblance. Every milestone I'd celebrated, every expense I'd covered, every moment of pride I'd felt watching Marcus grow, all of it had been orchestrated to maintain their lie, while extracting maximum financial benefit from my maternal instincts. My phone buzzed with a text from Walter. Working late tonight, don't wait up. Working late, I grabbed my car keys and drove to Thelma's house, the house I'd helped her buy with a down payment loan she'd never repaid. Walter's truck was in the driveway. Through the living room window, I could see them, my husband of 50 years and my sister sitting on the couch like any married couple, watching television while Marcus did homework at the kitchen table. It was a picture of domestic normalcy that excluded me entirely, funded by my money, built on my ignorance. I sat in my car, watching the family I'd unknowingly been supporting for 17 years, and felt something shift inside me. The confusion and hurt were crystallizing into something sharper. This wasn't just an affair. This was a systematic con game that had lasted nearly 2 decades. I drove home and called my lawyer, Margaret Chen, who'd handled my will and retirement planning. Margaret, I need to discuss fraud, elder abuse, and asset recovery. Audrey, what's happened? My husband has been conducting an 18-year affair with my sister. They have a 17-year-old son together. And I've unknowingly spent $127,000 supporting their secret family while being systematically excluded from any real relationship with the child. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. Audrey, are you saying they've been defrauding you for nearly 2 decades? I'm saying they've been using my childlessness and my love for family to manipulate me into funding their real relationship while keeping me as a convenient cover story, an ATM. How much evidence do you have? I looked at my dining room table, covered with financial records, photos, school documents, and Marcus's essay describing me as an unknowing benefactor. Enough to prosecute. But as I hung up the phone, I realized the legal case was only part of what needed to happen. The community that had watched me live this lie, the family members who'd participated in the deception, the friends who'd pitied my ignorance, they all needed to understand exactly what had been done to me. More importantly, I needed to understand something about myself. How had a woman who'd spent 35 years protecting children, recognizing deceptive behavior, and managing complex family dynamics become the victim of such an elaborate long-term fraud? The answer was uncomfortable, but clear. They'd weaponized my greatest vulnerabilities against me. My childlessness had made me desperate for family connection. My generosity had made me an easy target for financial manipulation. My trust in family had blinded me to obvious deception. But they'd also underestimated my greatest strengths. The same instincts that had made me an effective educator, pattern recognition, evidence gathering, protective advocacy, were now fully engaged on my own behalf. For 18 years, I'd been the unknowing victim of a systematic con game. But the game was about to change because the Mark had finally figured out the con. And unlike Marcus, Walter, and Thelma, I actually understood the difference between protective deception and criminal fraud. The teacher was about to school the students. The next morning, I did what I'd done for 35 years as an educator. I built a comprehensive action plan, but instead of designing curriculum for students, I was orchestrating justice for systematic fraud that had stolen 18 years of my life. My dining room became a strategic command center, financial records organized by year, legal documents sorted by relevance, phone numbers for attorneys, investigators, and former colleagues who could provide expert testimony. The same methodical approach that had made me an effective principal was now focused on dismantling the conspiracy that had defined my marriage. But I had advantages Walter, Thelma, and Marcus didn't know about. Margaret, it's Audrey. I need to discuss something confidential before we proceed with the fraud case. Of course. What is it? I inherited $340,000 from my great-aunt Josephine last year. Walter doesn't know about it. The inheritance came through a separate attorney, and I deposited it in an account he's never seen. The silence told me Margaret understood the implications immediately. Audrey, that changes everything. You have independent financial resources they can't access or manipulate. Independent resources. For the first time in 50 years of marriage, I had money that Walter couldn't steal, couldn't redirect to his secret family, couldn't use to fund his double life. Money that would let me fight back without depending on anyone's permission or support. There's more, Margaret. I own the lake house where all our family gatherings happen. It was part of the inheritance, but I never told Walter. He thinks it belongs to his cousin. So you control the location where they've been conducting their deception. Every family birthday party, every holiday celebration, every innocent gathering where they've been maintaining their lie. It's been happening on property I own. But it gets worse for them. I called my former colleague Janet, who'd worked with me for 20 years before I became principal. Janet, I need a favor. Can you help me document Marcus's school records and any communications between Walter and the school? Absolutely. What are you looking for? Evidence that Walter has been acting as Marcus's father in official capacities while I've been paying the bills. Emergency contacts, medical decisions, parent-teacher conferences, anything that shows he's been the real parent while I've been treated as just a funding source. Audrey, I've been waiting years for you to figure this out. I have documentation going back to elementary school showing Walter attending parent conferences, signing permission slips, making educational decisions, all while you were writing tuition checks. Documentation. The paper trail that would prove systematic fraud in family court, criminal court, and the court of public opinion. That afternoon, I drove to the bank where I'd maintained accounts for 40 years. Mrs. Patterson, I need to review all joint account activity for the past 5 years, and I need to open a separate account that only I can access. Of course, Mrs. Brennan. Is everything all right? I'm protecting myself from financial fraud. I need complete control over my assets while I pursue legal action. As Mrs. Patterson printed 5 years of bank records, I saw the pattern with devastating clarity. Every time I'd deposited money into our joint account, Walter had transferred portions to accounts I'd never seen. Money I'd earned, money I'd inherited, money I'd saved, systematically redirected to support his secret family while I lived on a budget he controlled. Mrs. Patterson, I want to transfer all my assets to the new individual account, everything. That's quite a large sum, Mrs. Brennan. Are you sure? I'm protecting my retirement funds from someone who's been stealing from me for 18 years. I've never been more sure of anything. But my most powerful weapon wasn't financial. It was informational. I called Detective Morrison, who'd handled financial crimes cases involving several of my former students' families. Detective, this is Audrey Brennan. I need to report systematic elder fraud and financial abuse spanning 18 years. Mrs. Brennan, I remember you from the Henderson case. What's the situation? My husband and sister have been conducting an affair for 18 years. They have a 17-year-old son together, and they've defrauded me of over $127,000 while systematically excluding me from parental decisions about a child I've been financially supporting. Jesus, Audrey, how much evidence do you have? Enough to prosecute. Financial records, school documents, DNA evidence, and written admissions from the minor child involved. Can you come in tomorrow morning? Bring everything. That evening, I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd planned countless family gatherings, where I'd worried about Marcus's grades, where I'd celebrated his achievements while unknowingly funding my husband's secret family, and felt something I hadn't experienced in decades, complete control over my own life. Walter came home at his usual time, carrying the same briefcase he'd used to maintain his double life for 18 years. "How was your day, sweetheart?" he asked, kissing my cheek with the same casual affection that had masked systematic betrayal. "Very productive," I replied, looking up from the legal documents I was organizing. I met with Margaret Chen about updating my will, opened a new bank account, and had a long conversation with Detective Morrison about financial crimes. Walter's face went pale. Financial crimes? Systematic fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy to defraud. The detective was very interested in the evidence I've compiled over the past week. For the first time in 50 years of marriage, Walter was speechless. The confident man who'd been managing his double life with such skill looked like a student caught cheating on the most important test of his life. "Walter, tomorrow morning you're going to call Thelma and Marcus. You're going to tell them that the game is over. The evidence is overwhelming, and they need to prepare for the consequences of 18 years of systematic fraud." The teacher had become the principal, and class was about to begin. Sunday family dinner at the lake house arrived with the same gathering that had facilitated 18 years of systematic deception. But this time, the conspirators didn't know they were walking into a trap on property I secretly owned. "Aunt Audrey, you seem different today," Marcus said as he walked into the dining room where I'd set the table for what would be our last family meal together. "I'm feeling very clear today, Marcus," I replied, placing my leather briefcase on the head of the table with the same authority I'd once used in school board meetings. "Clearer than I've been in 18 years. Walter and Thelma entered together, as they always did, maintaining the pretense of casual family interaction while conducting their real relationship in plain sight. Around the table sat the same extended family members who'd watched them deceive me for nearly 2 decades, cousins, aunts, and family friends who'd known the truth but stayed silent. "Before we eat," I announced, my voice carrying the professional authority that had commanded respect for 35 years, "I have something important to share with everyone." Thelma started to interrupt. "Audrey, maybe we should—" "Sit down, Thelma." The command in my voice stopped her mid-sentence. "Everyone needs to hear this." I opened my briefcase and pulled out the organized evidence files, spreading them across the table like I'd done countless times when presenting disciplinary cases to parents. "Last week, I discovered that Walter and Thelma have been conducting an 18-year affair, that Marcus is their biological son, and that I've been systematically defrauded of $127,000 while being excluded from any real relationship with my own stepson." The room fell silent, but this time, the silence belonged to me. "This is Marcus's DNA test, showing Walter as his biological father." I held up the laboratory report. "These are financial records showing Walter transferring money from our joint accounts to support his secret family. And this is Marcus's college essay, describing me as my father's wife, who doesn't know our true relationship, but whose generosity has been useful for funding his education." The family members who'd nodded along with the deception for 18 years were now staring at the conspirators with growing horror. "But it gets worse," I continued, pulling out my timeline. The systematic psychological manipulation was coordinated. Every family gathering where they acted as Marcus's real parents while I served food and took photos. Every financial crisis where Thelma needed help while Walter was secretly supporting her. Every moment where I expressed maternal love for a child who was actually my stepson, while being systematically excluded from any real parental decisions. My cousin Dorothy, who'd attended every family gathering, spoke first. "Audrey, are you saying they've been lying to all of us?" "I'm saying Walter, Thelma, and Marcus have been conducting a systematic 18-year fraud that turned me into an unknowing financial supporter of my husband's secret family, while destroying my sense of reality and family connection." Walter finally found his voice. "Audrey, we can work this out privately." "Privately?" I stood up, my full professional authority on display. "You publicly humiliated me for 18 years. You used family gatherings to facilitate your affair while I paid for the celebrations. You allowed me to pour maternal love into a child who was coached to see me as a convenient funding source rather than his stepmother." But the most devastating moment came when I addressed Marcus directly. "Marcus, you wrote in your college essay that this situation taught you about the sometimes necessary nature of protective deception. Let me teach you something about the difference between protection and fraud." I pulled out the legal documents Detective Morrison had prepared. Criminal charges have been filed for elder abuse, systematic fraud, and conspiracy to defraud. Margaret Chen is pursuing civil action for full asset recovery plus damages. And since I own this lake house, something none of you knew, you're all trespassing on my property while I deliver justice." The shock on their faces was complete. Walter, who'd thought he was managing his double life so skillfully, looked like a man watching his entire world collapse. "You own the lake house?" Thelma whispered. "I inherited it last year, along with $340,000 that Walter never knew about. The same inheritance that's now funding the legal action that will destroy all of you." But I wasn't finished delivering justice. "Detective Morrison will be contacting each of you for statements about the psychological abuse you witnessed. Every family member who knew the truth but stayed silent will be asked to explain their complicity in systematic elder fraud. And Marcus," I looked directly at the 17-year-old who'd been trained to deceive me, "you'll be explaining to college admissions officers why your application essays were based on criminal fraud." The extended family members who'd enabled the deception were now looking at Walter, Thelma, and Marcus with disgust rather than complicity. "Walter, you have 30 minutes to remove your belongings from my house. Thelma, you have 1 week to arrange repayment of the $127,000 you've stolen, or face criminal prosecution. Marcus, you have until tomorrow to withdraw your college applications and explain to every school that your essays were based on systematic fraud." I closed my briefcase with the same decisive snap I'd used after expelling students who'd violated every principle of honesty and integrity. "The woman you thought was too naive to recognize systematic deception has just delivered the kind of comprehensive justice that ends careers, destroys reputations, and sends people to prison." The family gathering that had facilitated 18 years of betrayal had just become the setting for complete accountability. They'd underestimated exactly who they were stealing from. The educator who'd spent 35 years protecting children and maintaining institutional integrity had just applied those same skills to protecting herself. Class was officially dismissed. 8 months later, I stood in the same lake house where I'd delivered justice to my family's conspiracy. But everything had changed. The woman who'd once apologized for asking questions about her own stepson was gone, replaced by someone who'd reclaimed not just her assets, but her entire sense of self-worth. The legal proceedings had been swift and devastating. Walter pled guilty to elder fraud and received 18 months in prison plus full restitution. Thelma faced criminal charges for conspiracy and was ordered to repay every dollar with interest. Marcus's college applications were withdrawn after admissions officers learned his essays were based on systematic fraud. But more importantly, the entire community now understood exactly what had been done to Audrey Brennan. "Mrs. Brennan, it's Detective Morrison," came the familiar voice on my phone. "I wanted to let you know the final restitution payment came through. $127,000 in stolen funds, plus $83,000 in damages and legal fees. Your case is officially closed. $210,000. Not just recovery, but justice with compound interest." "Detective, this case has become a model for elder fraud prosecution, hasn't it?" "Ma'am, in 25 years of financial crimes, I've never seen a victim build such a comprehensive case against systematic family fraud. The DA's office is using your documentation methods to train other investigators." After I hung up, I sat in my renovated home office, the same room where I'd discovered Marcus's essay describing me as an unknowing benefactor. But now it held something different: correspondence from the National Center on Elder Abuse, requesting my consultation on family fraud cases. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find my former colleague Janet holding a bottle of champagne. "Audrey, I heard about the final settlement and the consulting offer. How does it feel to be the most respected elder fraud expert in the state?" "Like I'm finally using my skills where they matter most," I said, and meant it completely. For 35 years, I protected other people's children. Now I'm protecting other people's parents. Janet smiled. "The school district called. They want to know if you'd consider developing a curriculum on recognizing family manipulation and financial abuse. Apparently, your case study is being taught in social work programs across the country." Developing curriculum on family fraud. Using the systematic deception I'd endured to educate others about recognizing and preventing elder abuse. The idea sent energy through me that I hadn't felt since my principal days. "Tell them yes," I said without hesitation. "Absolutely yes." That evening, my neighbor Dorothy came to visit, something that happened regularly now that the truth was public knowledge. She sat in my living room, which no longer displayed family photos of people who'd systematically betrayed me. "Audrey, my daughter asked me something interesting yesterday. She wanted to know how you figured out such a complex deception when everyone else just accepted it." I considered the question carefully. I stopped making excuses for other people's behavior and started trusting my own professional instincts. 35 years of education taught me to recognize when children are lying, when families are dysfunctional, and when systematic problems require systematic solutions. Dorothy nodded thoughtfully. "My friend Eleanor is having similar issues with her son-in-law controlling her finances. Would you be willing to talk to her?" "Of course. And Dorothy, tell her to document everything. Every condescending comment, every financial decision made without her input, every time someone questions her competence. Evidence is power, and patterns reveal truth." The transformation wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. The woman who'd once funded her own humiliation now spoke with unqualified authority about family dynamics and financial protection. My attorney Margaret Chen stopped by later that week. "Audrey, I have to ask, how did you maintain such detailed records throughout the deception? Most victims don't have nearly this level of documentation." 40 years of teaching trained me to keep meticulous records of everything. But more than that, I learned to trust my instincts when something felt wrong, even when everyone else was telling me I was imagining things. Margaret smiled. "The State Bar Association wants you to speak at their elder law conference. Your case has changed how attorneys approach family fraud cases." The ripple effects continued expanding. The National Association of Elementary School Principals invited me to present on recognizing family dysfunction in students. The prosecutor's office asked me to train investigators on documentation techniques. 3 universities requested permission to use my case in their social work and criminology programs. But the most meaningful transformation was internal. The voice that had been systematically silenced for 18 years was now stronger than ever. "If this story resonates with you," I said into my phone, recording a message for the Elder Abuse Prevention Program. "Remember this, your professional instincts don't disappear when you retire. Your ability to recognize deception doesn't diminish with age. Your right to honest relationships doesn't expire when you become vulnerable." I paused, thinking about the woman I'd been 8 months ago, funding her own stepson's education while being excluded from his real family. I spent 35 years protecting children from adults who would exploit them. I had to learn to apply those same protective instincts to myself. The people who truly love you don't require systematic deception to maintain relationships. They don't use your vulnerabilities as weapons against you. Real family validates your intelligence and includes you in truth, not conspiracy. The recording would be used in training sessions nationwide, helping other seniors recognize the warning signs I'd missed for too long. As I hung up the phone, I realized the most profound change wasn't in my circumstances, it was in my voice. The woman who'd whispered questions about family dynamics now spoke with the authority of someone who'd fought systematic fraud and won. Walter, Thelma, and Marcus had tried to steal my money, my family relationships, and my sense of reality. They'd succeeded for 18 years, but they'd never touched what mattered most, the professional competence and protective instincts that had defined my career. In the end, those skills hadn't just exposed them, they'd transformed me into someone who could protect others from the same systematic exploitation. Some people underestimate retired educators at their own peril. We've spent decades learning exactly how to recognize deception and deliver consequences.